There we go. Sorry for the 10-minute delay. We're going to get started to the board. Good morning. This November 24th, 2021 meeting of the Board of Estimates is now called to order. In the interest of promoting health and safety as we continue to deal with COVID-19 pandemic, the Board of Estimate continues to meet virtually. At this time, I'll ask Comptroller Henry for any corrections, additions, or noted abstentions to today's agenda. Comptroller Henry, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. There are no corrections to today's agenda. The following protests were received by the board on pages 87 and 88. Item number 3, B50006022, citywide police requested towing services. Protests were received from Jim Elliott's Towing and Universal Towing. The following items are being deferred. Page 72, Department of Transportation minor privilege permit application is being deferred until December 8th at the request of the council president. Pages 87 to 88, item number 3, B50006022, citywide police requested towing services. This item is being deferred until December 8th at the request of the city administrator. The following items are moved to the non-routine agenda. On page 17, Department of Law, Settlement Agreement and Release. On pages 74 to 76, Department of Transportation, Amendment number 1 to Agreement. And pages 134 to 136, Baltimore Development Corporation, Lease, Development and Operating Agreement. No items are being moved to the routine agenda. We have received the following abstentions from the Honorable Mayor Brandon Scott on page 13, item number 2, Baltimore City Health Department, agreement with Johns Hopkins University Bloomberg School of Public Health. On page 14, item number 3, Baltimore City Health Department, agreement with the Johns Hopkins University Bloomberg School of Public Health. On pages 109 and 110, item number 9, personnel. Health Department Contract Services Specialist number 2. The Honorable President Nick Mosby is abstaining on page 37, City Council Bill 21-0154. Page 40, Office of the State's Attorney Grant Award. Pages 60 to 61, Department of Housing and Community Development Land Disposition Agreement with Madison Park North LLC developer. Pages 113 to 118, items number 14 to 19, personnel matters. Pages 130 to 131, items number 1 through 3, travel requests. Director of Public Works, Jason Mitchell, is abstaining on page 81, Department of Public Works, expenditure of funds. There are no other abstentions, no votes, and no rejection of recommended awards. Thank you, Mr. President.
No, thank you, Mr. Comptroller. At this point, I would like to direct the board's attention to a memorandum from my office dated November the 22nd, 2021, identifying matters to be considered as routine agenda items, together with any corrections and additions that have been noted by our comptroller. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to approve all items contained on the routine agenda.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. The routine agenda is now adopted. The first item of non-routine agenda today can be found on page 17, Department of Law Settlement Agreement and Release. This is a proposed settlement in the amount of $380,000, and it stems from an accident where a DPW solid waste truck struck and killed a pedestrian in an intersection. At this time, I would like to recognize Deputy Solicitor Ingram to speak on behalf of the settlement. Director Ingram, the floor is yours.
Mr. President, I'll have to step in for the deputy today. He's away, but I will in turn defer to Chief Solicitor Liddy Glenn, who can address the subject.
Thank you, Mr. Solicitor. Chief Glenn, the floor is yours.
Good morning, President Mosby. Good morning, Board of Estimates. I'm here today to discuss, the settlement of the matter of Cassandra Geller versus Mayor and City Council and David Booker. We recommend the settlement. The Law Department has accepted a recommendation to settle the matter for $380,000. It's a solid waste truck accident that resulted in the death of a pedestrian who was lawfully walking across the street. And the accident occurred on September 5th, 2017, at or about the intersection, well, on Orleans Street, but at the intersection with North Milton Avenue. And in light, we're recommending a settlement ahead of before trial because of the events that occurred, and also because the cap on this matter is 400,000. Do you have any questions, sorry, that I can address?
No, thank you, Chief Glenn. At this point, for members of the board, are there any questions or concerns for Chief Glenn? Mr. Solicitor, I yield the floor to you. I'm sorry. Mr. Comptroller, I yield the floor to you.
I appreciate that, sir. The solicitor and I have had a number of conversations about the fact that I never went to law school, and I think that I'm going to be really comfortable staying in this particular lane, especially for this item. I'm sorry, to make sure I've got everything. Okay, Ms. Glenn, the information submitted to the board was that the pedestrian was lawfully walking in the crosswalk when he was hit. Was it established that the DPW truck driver was also operating his vehicle lawfully when the accident occurred?
The Baltimore Police Department Accident Investigation Unit determined that while the solid waste truck was making a left on a proper signal, because of the, and I forget the section of the code, but the pedestrian was more lawful than the left turn. And it was determined that he failed to keep a proper lookout. And that's why it resulted in the accident. I will note that the Baltimore Police Department determined that it was an accident, that Mr. Booker was driving within the speed limit and had, like I said, a signal that allowed him to make a left turn. They also, the state's attorney's office, as a result of the investigation, decided not to press any criminal charges in this case.
Okay, so even though the employee was not charged with a crime, were any disciplinary measures imposed by the department as a result of the accident?
According to the records, DPW immediately suspended the driver's driving privileges indefinitely. And as a result, he was also demoted because without having these driving privileges, he could no longer fulfill his position.
That you're aware of, has DPW performed any additional studies or determined whether it's too difficult for somebody driving a DPW vehicle of this size to see a pedestrian who's approaching from the passenger side?
I do not know if DPW has conducted any studies.
Okay. Okay, so Mr. President, I think that's all the questions I have for the law department. And while I think I will be following up with DPW about the hazards of driving some of our larger vehicles, I don't think it's going to have an impact on this particular matter before us. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Comptroller. At this point, are there any additional questions or concerns from any other members of the board? Hearing and seeing none, at this point, I'll entertain a motion.
I move approval.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. This item is now approved. On to our next item for today's non-routine agenda. It can be found on pages 74 through 76, Department of Transportation Amendment Number 1 to Agreement. This item would amend and extend the city's existing agreement with American Traffic Solutions Incorporated. The existing contract covers the operation of the city's school zone and red light enforcement camera system, and the amendment will cover the installation and operation of monitoring cameras along I-83. At this time, I'd like to turn the floor over to Director Steve Sharkey from the Department of Transportation to explain the agreement. Director Sharkey, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Council President, and thank you, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Comptroller, Mr. Solicitor, and Mr. Director. Uh, Thank you for having us today. I'm really excited to talk about this safety program that we're putting forward. So as we all know, 83 has a lot of speeding on it, and it is an unsafe roadway. Last year, or I guess earlier this year, the state legislature gave us the authority as a city to begin putting speed cameras on 83 to slow people down. 2 speed cameras. The legislation authorizes 2 active speed cameras on 83. There's some caveats. Of course, there's going to be a 90-day waiting period or 90-day notification period. So we're not just turning on the lights. We're really making sure that this is safe. So people are going to know. We're going to be upfront about it, telling people not to speed. Also, there's going to be speed sentries along the corridor that tell people that they're speeding. So this is a complete way to make people slow down. The total goal for this is to make people slow down. So what we've done is pulled together a team with us and BPD and finance very quickly to implement this, which will be this is a very large undertaking. And we're working with our speed camera vendor to make an amendment to put this in. But let me just go back to the safety piece again, how critical it is to slow people down on 83. That's what this is for. So besides the 2 cameras that will enforce speed, we are going to have 6 total cameras on the road. Only 2 will be active, and it will be a lot of pre-notice when they get moved. We're not going to just move them day to day. It's going to say, this is where these are going to be, or this is the 2 that are going to be active for this time period. It's going to be a lot of forewarning and notice, but there will be 6 on the corridor. So we really want people to know they're speeding. There'll be speed sentries letting them know they're speeding, and it'll be there. So that's very important. We're excited about the safety. We're also pleased because all of the revenue goes directly back into 83 and 83 related expenses. So this is, it's all a win for improving the safety on 83 in both the short and long term. So pretty excited about the program, and let me know if you guys have other questions.
Thank you, Director Sharkey. I have a couple questions. When the board approved the extension a couple months ago for American Traffic Solutions, was it the administration's goal or understanding at the time that the 83 contract would fall under that extension?
So that extension was an extension of time for the current camera contract. So it's an extension of time for the current speed camera contract, which we have over 140, 150 speed cameras throughout the city. So that was an extension of time. This is a separate amendment to add to that. So we were.
I realize that, Director Sharkey. I guess just to get to my point, what I'm asking is, at that time when the administration brought the extension in front of this board and we agreed to move forward with that extension, did we understand and know that this would be an amendment, or was there an expectation that it would go to open bid?
No, this is going to be an amendment. This is an amendment to the thing. So no, I'm trying to remember what month that was, but I don't think there was particular designs on what we were doing or not doing at the time. But for the last 3 or 4 months, what month is it now? Time is moving quickly.
November. It's November.
Yeah, so probably about last 4 months, we've been working feverishly on this, and this is the way that we've determined is the fastest way to make this happen.
So I guess the concern is some level of transparency when that extension was originally brought in front of this board. I think a really important piece of that information would have been that this 83 contract was going to just roll under that extension that this board in good faith approved to move forward. I think that that's where the concern is. So that's why I was wondering, was it a determination just over the past couple of months that this was going to be separated, this was going to be handled as an amendment on that extension? Or did the administration know at the time of the extension that this was always the plan to do it this way?
No, I mean, the reason for the extension was to extend the current speed camera contract. That
I
was the
realize
reason.
that. No,
That was the reason for the extension.
yeah. But yeah, so I understand that. I understand that we decided to come in front of this board and extend the contract for the existing red light contract associated with American Traffic Solutions. We get that. And this board looked at it. We had the ability of looking at the minority participation, women participation, and this board was very comfortable with what the deal was in place to extend that particular deal. However, when we extended that contract, the board did not have any information associated with the red light, with the speed cameras associated with I-83. That might have changed the approach associated with that extension if all board members had access to all the information. So as the leader of the Department of Transportation, I'm asking you, was the determination in the past 3 or 4 months that this was going to be an amendment onto that existing contract? Or did you know that at the time when this board was focusing and reviewing and deciding on whether we were going to extend the existing contract with American Traffic Solution?
No, so that was not the plan at the time.
Okay, so the plan at that particular time was that we were going to go to open bid for the 83 contract.
We were considering that option, correct?
Okay, so in the past 3 months, why did we decide not to go to open bid for the 83 contract?
So I believe that going to open bid would have taken us probably 18 months to get up and running.
Okay, so why did it take so long for us to get to the point of deciding? This was enacted by the General Assembly. We were allowed to do it, I believe, as early as last July. Why are we in November and going down this path?
Yeah, and let me just say, I want to talk about my staff and how hard they've worked on this. This isn't something where I just slap up some cameras. This is serious engineering, serious thought. It's not similar to it's not just another set of cameras. This is.
Director Sharkey, I hope you're not implying that this board is saying that the hardworking employees of Department of Transportation or yourself just rolled over and decided to do this plan. I guess what the board is trying to better understand is how we came to doing an extremely lucrative contract as an amendment on an existing a contract that this board had no idea that this was the approach we were taking.
Yeah, again, I just do want to make it clear that was not the plan. So I just want to make that clear.
I realize that. So we got to that point, and what I'm asking is, in this 3 months, like, what has changed? We had the ability of understanding and knowing like what we were going to do. I think that we did a series of some tests and some information. What changed throughout the process to put us in this point where we're taking this extremely lucrative deal that I have concerns with just on the nature of it, this extremely lucrative deal, and utilizing this board as just putting on an amendment of an existing contract that in good faith we reviewed several months ago, not knowing that this was going to be the outcome?
Yeah, I mean, this is a separate amendment that we are doing or we are bringing before the board today. And so
Yes.
this is for these speed cameras. That other amendment or extension was to extend the current camera program. This is an amendment to that program that specifically focuses on the 83 cameras.
Okay, I guess I'll ask the question in a different way. This board didn't extend that contract. We couldn't amend this onto that contract, correct?
If we didn't extend, probably no, not,
Okay,
or
that-
it would
that's
need
my
to be
point.
done at this time as well.
Yeah, so Director Sharkey, that's my entire point. My entire point is when we decided to extend the contract, it was based off of the information that we had at the time. At the time, we also knew that the 83 contract was going to be coming before us because the city had fought so hard to ensure, because of safety reasons, that the General Assembly allowed us to do this. What I'm saying from this board's perspective, in full transparency and providing all the information, it would have been a better discussion and a more fruitful discussion and a more transparent discussion if we would have talked about that extension knowing that there was a possibility that this extremely lucrative contract, this task order, could roll under that same existing contract. I'm not sure if other members of the board had access to information, but the idea and the understanding was that that was going to go for open bid. That did not take place. There was no competition. There was no process in which this extremely, again, lucrative task order was put out for open bid for the city of Baltimore to get the best bang for its buck as it relates to pricing. So that's where my concern is. You're telling me that it was not the motivation of the administration at the time. However, in the past 3 months, that has significantly changed. We've decided not to go to open bid, and we've decided to take this amendment approach. So I just wanted to understand and know better that that was the idea and that was the solution. So I appreciate you for that. Now, Director Sharkey, in the initial study of the program, when we did our trial, and I realized, and you're going to I'm going to ask you to kind of go over the numbers. I realized that we expect habits to change and patterns of driving to change significantly once we implement the enforcement of these cameras on 83. But we have to start somewhere. So I know that the numbers are going to significantly drop. But when we did our initial study, what was determined at that initial study?
We had an initial study. We put out one speed camera on 83, and it was determined that people speed a whole ton on 83, including some ridiculously high speed numbers.
Yes. Now, what was the number of potential citations that was derived from that particular study?
I'll bring Philip on here, but again, that location was not did not have speed sentries on it. But Philip, can you jump on to talk about that a little bit? Philip is on the line, should be on the line. Philip? No, okay.
Good morning. Is everybody able to hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Philip. Thank you for joining.
Good morning. Yeah, my name is Philip Mellerson, the ATV's director for the Department of Transportation. And just to go back of what Director Sharkey was indicating, one second, let me mute my phone. When we put the test camera on I-83, it was near the Pepsi Cola sign. There was a potential violations of 150 citations within a 7-day marking period.
There was only 150.
150,000.
Yeah, 150,000. I think you chopped off. 150,000 potential citations, correct?
I'm sorry, I'm unable to hear you.
I'm sorry. I said, just for the record, and so we're all on the same page, there was 150,000 potential citations in a 7-day period, correct? I think Mr. Phillip is having some technical issues, Dr. Sharkey.
Philip, can you hear me? No, yeah, no, that's what he said. Yes. Oh, hold on.
I have some additional questions for.
I'm sorry, I'm unable to hear him.
Yeah, we understand you're having some technical issues.
My apologies.
No problem, sir. Can you hear us, Mr. Millerson? Can you hear me?
No, he can't hear, but I think he can talk. So I will.
Well, for the interest of time, what I'm going to do is hold on this item. We can maybe jump into the arena and then potentially jump back to see if maybe the technical issues are straightened out, and then we'll move forward. To me, I think that's the best solution because Mr. Millerson is the subject matter expert as it relates to the numbers, right, Director Sharkey?
Mr. President,
Yeah.
Director Sharkey, you should answer the questions. If Mr. Millerson is having technical difficulties, you should just respond to all of the president's questions.
Yeah, I will. Adria's here as well.
Okay, so so just getting back to the series of questions. So I guess what Mr. Millerson was communicating to us is in a 7-day test period, we saw 150,000 potential citations that could have been cited if the camera system was up and running, right?
Yes.
All right. Now, what we know is that, again, the speed sensors weren't out. Patterns of behavior were not able to take effect yet, meaning once we deploy the system, the idea is folks will either avoid 83 or it will change the patterns of behavior in which they drive. So the idea is that we would see a significant decline in the number of potential citations and then eventually level off, correct?
Correct.
Now, Director Sharkey, I know that when I was able to get the briefing a couple of weeks ago, there was a chart that kind of showed the number of citations and the amount in which the revenue that would come in per camera and ultimately be shared with the vendor. Now, if we were able to say, like, cut the numbers in half, say 75,000 citations in a week, or whatever number you guys are projecting that would be, what would that revenue share look like?
So we're projecting the revenue share to be between 18 and 25%.
Right. So, and as it relates to like dollars and cents, what does that equate to?
I think we're expecting, I'm expecting from my look at it, probably about us to get about, or not us, the income to be about 15 to 20 million a year.
Only 15 to 20 million a year.
That's, yeah. So we do have a sliding scale that we have based upon whether the numbers go up way higher than we expect or way lower than we expect. But I'm not expecting it to be extremely on the extremely high side. People will start slowing down once we put up 90-day notice, 6 speed sentries on the place, and six locations with cameras that they're going to be slowing down on.
Okay, so your expectation is that the city will not net more than $20 million a year on the I-83 camera program.
That is my expectation. I'm not promising that, but that's my educated guess.
That's your educated guess, understood. And if that is the case, that would mean that the profit share with the American Traffic Solution would be around, you said 20 million? 20%. Would be about $4 million, right?
Yeah, and again, it's not profit share; it is income share.
The revenue that it would derive is based off of a calculation associated with the percentage. I believe that in the documentation that you guys sent me, you said 22%, give or take. So I put it down to 20%. And if you're right, the $20 million, that would equate to $4 million going to American Traffic Solution, correct?
Correct.
Another question that I asked of the administration was, how much were the cameras? How much the cameras cost, and what do we project the installation to be?
So this is part of the whole contractual deal is the installation. So there'll be 6 cameras. Hold on, Philip keeps texting me. I think he'll give me the exact number here. Oh, hold on. Okay. Yeah. So each camera, each month we pay for the cameras. So these cameras are part of the larger deal. So this is part of the revenue share pays for the cameras here. So, and just so, yes, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, would you like to speak?
Yeah, Mr. President, just a follow up on one of your questions around the amount of citations that they are projecting in the dollar amount. I did think it's also important, Mr. Director, if you could provide us with like the crash data. You gave us high level, but you were able to give us the exact number or approximate number of citations. But I would assume that you guys have the exact amount of like crash data by year or et cetera that happens on 83. Can you share that with us too?
Yeah.
Yeah, and Director Sharkey, thank you, Mr. Mayor, for that point. And Director Sharkey, I want to be very clear. I think I don't just share this. I think all members of this board shares this. The issue of 83 and creating a more safe environment is the reason that as a delegate, I fought for trying to get cameras on 83. So we are all supportive of this and understand and know that this is the right thing to do. However, there are many ways of skinning a cat. And I think the concern that I'm trying to go down the path of is not the importance of implementing this program as soon as and quickly as possible, but doing it in the right way that's, from a fiduciary perspective, is in the best interest of taxpayers. And, I have some concerns with this contract. I've communicated that to you, Dr. Sharkey, and I think that's the path that we're going down. But I just want to be very clear about this is not a discussion around whether we should have cameras on 83 or not. This is a discussion around, one, the way that this bid was handled in a lack of an open way, but just providing an amendment on an existing contract. But then also, two, the agreement that the city is ultimately trying to go that path and create with American Traffic Solutions. At this point, Director Sharkey, per the mayor's request, if you could go over the safety information.
Sure. Pulling it up on my phone as we speak. Okay. So for a 5-year period, there were 30 serious or fatal crashes in a 5-year period on 83. So yeah, so that's almost 6 serious. Yes, Mr. Mayor. And that's serious meaning serious injuries. Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Steve, what about total amount of accidents that happen in the year? I just know because I know, for example, this is something even from a policing standpoint that the Northern District basically, anytime it rains, has to take 2 officers and sit them on 83 to block off traffic. It's something that we've asked the state police to help us with numerous times. I get the first time I remember is when the president, the comptroller, and I were all on the council when we asked for assistance there. Like, I think it's not just about the serious accidents, it's about the accidents that happen every day that eat up a lot of taxpayer dollars by way of police resources, but also hurt the Northern District's ability to respond to other calls and be proactive against violence in Baltimore too. So I want to know like the amount of total accidents that happen there.
Yeah, Adria, jump in here.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor. So I can share a little bit of additional data based on what the director was pointing to. So there was a crash analysis study that was performed on 83 from 2015 to 2019. And during that time, there were more than 2,000 crashes on the roadway, 50 of which were classified as high injury or severe. And excessive speed was the #1 contributing factor for the high injury and severe crashes. Mr. Mayor, to your point, just looking at the calendar year 2020 alone, Baltimore Police Department reported over 1,700 calls for service on I-83. And as the board knows, traditional methods of speed enforcement are not possible on 83 given the roadway shoulders and the inability to widen shoulders. So not only are we looking at, as you indicated, a lot of severe crashes, but also significant drain on resources for the police department. So during that time, that we had a 1-week period in which the cameras were testing speeds along the roadway. The cameras reported approximately 360,000 vehicles traveling on the roadway. Of those vehicles, 151,000, around 42% were found to exceed the speed limit by 12 miles per hour or more, and 102,000, or 28%, exceeded the speed limit by more than 15 miles per hour. During this time, the highest recorded speed was 173 miles per hour.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, you finished your questions?
That are all my questions for now, Mr. President.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Director Sharkey, back to my line of questioning. So how much the cost of installation of these cameras and the actual hard costs associated with the cameras?
So generally, our current cameras that we have are generally 4,000 per month. That is the fee that we pay, or how most places charge fees. So I don't know, we won't know the exact fee to charge that it will cost them to put these cameras up. They're not exactly the same cameras. It's going to require a fair amount of engineering by them. And it will also be in somewhat dangerous positions where we'll have to shut down parts of 83 to put these cameras up. So I do not have what the actual cost will be. That is a cost borne by the vendor.
Yeah, and the city has no interest in understanding what that cost is.
No, we're happy to learn the costs over time, but this is, we do not know what the cost is of that individual line item.
All right, so I asked for this information a couple weeks ago. We haven't been able to get that information as of yet, correct?
Yeah, and the vendors will not share that because they believe it to be proprietary information.
They believe that to be proprietary information. Now, regarding that chart that I'm referring to, when we talked about the chart, I believe that there's an agreement to normalize out what the fee will be moving forward over the course of a couple months. Can you explain that process?
Yeah, so we're not, so we've set it up in a somewhat risk averse way for this, so that as after the first, say, 6 months or different time periods, there's going to be resets of the contract. So it's never going to be anything where there's going to be a range of dollar values or range of tickets issued per average per month. And so during that month, that will be, as the range continues and we get more data, we will normalize the range. So as the numbers go down, we will then be able to reset the monthly fee. So the monthly fee will be based on the average of what's coming in overall within ranges, and then the monthly fee will be set. So especially after 6 months, we'll be able to. It's not reset; it's according to a pre-planned set of issues. So we already have it laid out that if we have a certain amount of tickets per month, and at this point in time, this is what the fee will be, and we can change it a couple times during the contract.
Understood. So for the first month, we're going to actually issue citations and have the access to collecting revenue. Say if all of the work from the administration of making folks aware of the cameras, the sensors on 83, the flashing lights, folks getting getting the information that they would have been cited if it wasn't in this grace period. If we're able to reduce this $150,000 citation down to, say, 75,000 citations for that first month, because the expectation is that first month is going to be the largest amount of captured speeders and citations. If it was $75,000, what would that be? How much money would that be from a revenue perspective for the city?
Let me do the math on that.
Yeah, it's in that chart that you guys showed me. I don't have a copy of it though.
Gotcha. But yeah, it's 40. So 75 times 40.
Oh, 75,000 times $40.
Yeah. So
That's 100. That's 300. It's
3
150.
million.
Yeah,
3 million. Yeah.
So it'd be $3 million just in that 1 month, right?
Overall for the city. Yeah.
Right. Now that was per camera too, right?
Correct.
150,000 was per camera, right?
Yeah.
So if we doubled that, that would be now $6 million, right?
Yeah. But
And again, we're just using, no one has the real numbers, but the expectation is, this is a logical pattern of facts that we're kind of basing this off of to come up with some level of assumptions. So say if my assumption is right, say if we get 75,000 speeders per camera, 150,000 in that week, that's per week, right?
yeah, but again, I do not believe we're going to be getting that much once the program is active or anywhere near that amount.
But I think we can all agree that the reality is when the program starts, there's going to be a tremendous amount of windfall, right?
No, because there's a 3-month grace period. So there's going to be 90 days where people get, before it even starts, there's going to be 90 days where people get warnings. There'll be 90-day warning period before.
Yep. Director
the-
Sharkey, I realize what you're saying, but as it relates to kind of these programs in other places, the only one I know closest to mine is in Prince George's County. I see that $20 million per year in city revenue as extremely conservative. I think that we have the potential of maybe doing that in a couple months. Maybe I'm wrong, only time will tell. But I think that this was a very unique opportunity for the city to become entrepreneurial. I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity. We already have a certain level of skill set inside of city employees. I think that we could have utilized a way of contracting some of this work out. I think at a minimum, the fact that we didn't go down that path is problematic. But I also think the fact that we didn't open it up to the open market and allow folks to actually bid on this for us to dig down into details so we can better understand equipment costs, hard costs, installation costs based off of what the proposals were brought to us would have been a better tone. And now that we're here and a group that got an extension that had nothing to do with this, that we're amending this onto an existing contract, is telling us that the camera costs and the equipment costs is proprietary information, I think is extremely problematic. So, I'm really disappointed. This is no news to the administration. I've communicated this to you. But I think that what we'll see is that a couple initial months could have generated a tremendous amount of revenue, and how we get 80% of it or 78% of it. Us getting a lot more of it to ensure that we continue increasing safety of 83 and providing better outcomes for the citizens of Baltimore through, again, our fiduciary responsibility associated with their tax dollars and the dollars associated with these fines. That's where I have grave concern at. So, I won't continue to go down this rabbit hole of talking about these numbers. I will continue to look at this number. I think this $20 million per year number, not that it's not in good faith that you're providing it to me, just off of my ability of looking at these numbers and doing the research that I've done, I think is significantly south of what is going to come in. And I think that this particular vendor, American Traffic Solution, probably has received the best amendment to a contract that I've ever seen in the history of me being an elected official. They're going to get a tremendous amount of money in that first year, and their return on investment associated with cameras that could cost $10,000 or $15,000 in the installation and maintenance and operation of them, their return on investment is going to be significant. So with that, I'll rest. Again, this has nothing to do with the work that the fine women and men of Department of Transportation have done to get us to this particular point. Again, my concerns have absolutely nothing to do about the need for cameras on 83. I'm specifically talking about the way in which this particular contract was handled and the windfall that this particular vendor is going to receive in a process that was not open to the general public from a market share perspective. So with that, are there any additional questions or concerns from members of this board? Mr. Mayor, the floor is yours.
Good morning, President Mosby. Are you able to hear me?
Mr. Milton, you're no longer needed to be here, sir. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. President, thank you, and I appreciate your comments. I think one of the things that I will also uplift for me that's critically important, that we get 83 safer as fast as humanly possible. I think that for me, while we know that there will be revenue, it has to be strongly considered about the safety. We know that what's happening there almost every single day, as you very know, is putting people's lives at risk in more ways than one. And for me to be able to get this done as fast as possible with a proven vendor, I think is something that we should be considering as well. But understand your concerns, disagree, but understand your concerns and want to uplift, as we all know, the importance of the safety and the work that Steve and his team have put in.
Yes, definitely appreciate the work that Steve and his team has put in. But that's why I was perplexed, knowing that we need to get to this as quickly as possible. And, you know, we've had a tremendous amount of time to kind of put it out in the open bid, to kind of go down a different path. I guess my disappointment, Mr. Mayor, is again, we extended a contract and now we're amending onto that extension. I think in good faith, it would have been fair for the board when we were going down the path of extending that existing contract to understand and know that this was a possibility, that this was going to come on a couple months later as an amendment. Because at that time, the same issues and questions that I'm asking as far as the details would have been factored in my decision associated with that particular extension at the time. With that said, at this point, I'll entertain a motion.
Move approval.
Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. For the record, I would like to be listed in the nay so that this item is approved at a 4 yay to 1 nay vote. The final item on today's non-routine agenda can be found on pages 134 through 136, the Baltimore Development Corporation Lease Development and Operating Agreement. This item relates to a proposed renovation of the Baltimore Arena by Oakview Group. At this time, I will turn the floor over to Colin Talbert of the BDC to walk us through this item. CEO Talbert, the floor is yours.
Good morning, Mr. President, Mayor, members of the board. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you on this item. It's a very exciting item. As you mentioned, this will be a lease development and operating agreement for the Baltimore Arena. We are proposing to enter into a 30-year lease agreement with an affiliate of the Oakview Group. Oakview Group is a national arena developer, operator, and they will be investing a minimum of $150 million to restore, to renovate, and turn the current arena into a modern day facility. I believe we've provided the details in the Board of Estimates memo. I'm happy to walk through those as you would like, but also happy to turn it over to the board to answer any questions that you may have. I see Mr. Mayor has a hand up.
Are you finished your presentation, Mr. Talbert?
I'm finished. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, sir. At this point, yield the floor to the mayor.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Colin. As you know, I'm very excited to be at this point to get this done. This has been something that every administration that has been in existence since I've been in city government has tried to do. We got here by looking at out-of-the-box approaches and teamwork. I think I have a bunch of questions for you, but of course, Colin, you know, for me, when we're talking about the arena, one of the most important things to me is our commitment to the CIAA. No one is more excited to have that tournament here than I am. And as you know, and I really want you to talk about, I'll go through a few things, but safeguards for the CIAA to make sure that we're able to host the CIAA in 2023 is something that was the utmost important to me. And I would like for you to talk to the rest of the board about how and what we put in place for that. And I have other things that I would like to see, because we know that in order to do this right, we have to have a very aggressive construction schedule. And we'd like for either yourself or representatives for Oakview to walk us through that schedule so that we can all hear and really know and be assured that we can achieve this. I believe we can, and it is aggressive. But if we're going to actually get this done, we have to be aggressive to do something that will be changing for Baltimore. So those are my first two questions.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the questions. CIAA is absolutely important to the city, to you, to the council president, to the comptroller, to members of the board, as well as Oakview Group. And so we're very much aware of the tournament. Very excited for it coming live in person this year in 2022. And we absolutely are focused on delivering the arena in its new transformed modern state prior to the February 2023 CIAA. And so that would require Oakview Group to start construction in early 2022 after the CIAA tournament. So there will be no impact this coming year to CIAA, and then complete the renovations within approximately 1 year. And so while that is aggressive, we've been assured that that is also realistic. Clark Construction, one of the largest and premier national builders, is the contractor for this site, for this project. And Steve Collins, who has joined us today on behalf of Oakview, is a very seasoned construction manager, and will oversee the construction. He can give you a little bit about his background and then walk us through the different milestones on construction. I did just want to add that while the contract is pending before you today in preparation, because you and others have mentioned the importance of CIAA and also raised questions about the aggressiveness of the schedule, we have been working preliminarily on the design documents, so they are fairly far along. We've also already begun conversations with the city in terms of permitting, review, etc. So the goal here is to, with the board's consideration, assume if there is a vote to approve the lease today, we will hit the ground running immediately, and we'll be starting the design review process. There will also be material orders placed immediately in order to meet the deadline. But I am not a construction expert, as you know, and so what I'd like to do with the board's permission is to have a representative from Oakview Group provide a little bit more detail and context to the project and how they plan to execute the construction in the time frame to accommodate CIAA.
Thank you, CEO Talbert. At this, Mr. Mayor, do you have your hand raised?
Yeah. I just want to make sure for Mr. Talbert and the folks from Oakview that the understanding is both the CIAA, but walking us through the construction schedule.
Gotcha. At this point, before we move on to Oakview or a representative from Oakview, are there any members of the board that have additional questions for Mr. Talbert? Hearing and seeing none, I believe Ms. Lisa Harris-Jones, you have your hand raised. I assume that you're the representative for Oakview on the call.
Sure. We do have Steve Collins, who was on, that was going to walk you through the construction, but for some reason he got knocked out.
I'm on. I'm not to interrupt you. Yeah, I ended up having to turn off my video because I think just the Wi-Fi is not in a place where Wi-Fi is not great. I apologize for that, but if you guys can hear me, I'm happy to walk through the construction schedule.
That's great.
We can hear you loud and clear. So
Okay.
At this point, you can have the floor.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Mr. President and Mr. Mayor and the rest of the staff. Appreciate you having us on. So first of all, I'd like to take one step back and just, I think there's a couple components that should give you comfort that we can execute this on what is essentially an 11-month construction window. First, the team that we have on this, and including myself, and I'll just give you just a little background on my background. I worked for Madison Square Garden for 13 years. I led the forum renovation, which was 3 22-week shutdowns, so putting about $200 million of work in place over 3 22-week summers. I also managed the LA Forum renovation, and then went on to work for the Warriors to build Chase Center, and then ultimately Seattle, which just opened a month ago, and Belmont, which is where I am right now, and why the Wi-Fi is not great, because I'm in a location that's not lit up yet. So the team, I think, is important. Both myself, Paul Young, who I think is on this call, who works for me, also went through all those projects with me, works for Oakview Group, and the design and construction team are a group of consultants and contractors that have also gone on the Madison Square Garden journey and the LA Forum journey with us. So our architect is the architect that did the MSG renovation and also did the Forum renovation, and has done probably a half a dozen other major arena renovations. So I guess the point there is it's a team that's worked together before, knows each other well, knows the environment, knows the renovation market and the intricacies of having to deal with a renovation on an older building. The second piece of it is that we've been working on this now for a while. I think we're pushing 8 months. This has been a project that's been very important to Oakview Group and to our CEO, Tim Lewicki. And so we have actually gone at risk and either through our relationships with our consulting and contracting team, or actually reaching into our pocket and paying for an advancement of the design and getting ourselves in a place where we're ready to go when we push the button. We've actually advanced the drawing set to the point that if we're fortunate enough to get approval here, we would be ordering steel within days, and locking in our position in the steel mill, which, as anyone that touches construction knows, that's probably a 4-month jump right there. Had we not been preparing the drawings and the procurement packages and lining all of this up, then yes, 11 months is a very tough window to fit in. But we are essentially ready, teed up for on demolition and on steel procurement and a couple of other long lead items to hit the go button. The drawings have progressed to SD level and CD levels in some areas, and so what we've done, instead of a traditional design bid build, which most people are used to in a corn shell office building or residential, what we have is overlapping work streams. So essentially, you're breaking this down at a very high level. We've designed out the long lead items and the demolition and structural component. And as we're awarding those packages, we're finishing our MEP package. That MEP package, which is a significant piece of the work, will be done in less than 3 weeks. Again, we've been working on it for the last 4 to 5 months, which then allows us to award our MEP package at the same time that the final package, the finished package, is being finalized and awarded. So we're basically overlapping the permitting, design, procurement, and construction, which allows us to get to the 11-month construction window. And again, our contractor has done this before. We've done this before. Nobody wants the building to open as quickly as possible more than we do. We fully appreciate, respect, signed up for the CIAA tournament and understand how important that is to the city. And we want to be doing Drake and Lady Gaga and all that other good stuff right after CIAA and start to get a return on our investment. So we are very much incentivized to meet this schedule on a number of levels. So that's a high level just snapshot of the schedule, but I'm happy to drill down deeper.
Thank you. Before we go back to CEO Tarbert, are there any questions for Mr. Collins from the board?
No, Mr. President, I think it's an aggressive schedule. I am really pleased to hear that they pre-ordered some things to be prepared, especially with all that's going on with the supply chain. To me, that shows a real commitment to the project. However, I am, and I believe he's on the call, I am going to direct that Deputy Mayor Carter convene the folks involved in this project weekly to make sure that it stays on track.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for that commitment. Mr. Collins, I know you talked about a couple other projects. I think the one that was probably the most aggressive was the one that you guys had 3 tranches of 22 weeks of construction. I forget what facility you're talking about, but that's
yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. President. That was Madison Square Garden.
Got you. That was probably the most aggressive one that you kind of communicated to us, right?
Correct. The form, which was similar scope and size, the LA form, if you're familiar with it, that was about a 12-month construction window. It also had a very aggressive schedule, but similar in size and scope.
Understood. And when we talk about this construction schedule, have you developed any contingency plan? I'm a true believer in Murphy's Law. If something can go wrong, it will. We know that we are dealing with extremely adverse times, like the mayor pointed out, as relates to the supply chain from any and everybody, but particularly for heavy construction like this. And we're also dealing with a building that's over 60 years old that hasn't had any major renovations to what we're talking about. So once we start peeling back walls and opening things and putting in structural beams to support the suites and the like, a lot of things could go wrong. Is there a contingency plan associated if the construction schedule that you guys are laying out does not come to fruition?
So great question. I'll start off with a number of the comments that you made that resonate very well with us. We've spent a significant amount of time opening up walls and doing due diligence on trying to make sure that we understand exactly what is behind those walls. We've had consultants there on, they probably spent 20 days on site in total. We've also done geotech boring, so to understand the soil condition and what's going to be needed for micropiles or whatever the support system is there. So it all starts with a lot of upfront work to understand as much as we can. I would say from a perspective of how do you prepare for the unknown. The second tranche that I would say that we've worked very hard on and we've been very successful in the last 2 projects that we just finished and had to deal with supply chain issues and COVID, and they threw the kitchen sink at us over the last couple of years, is we've engaged a number of subcontractors and suppliers to understand exactly where they are and what's available, what's not available. And we've written the specs or designing in a way where we can be as nimble as possible. We did this on our other projects. If we can't get a certain component or material from one manufacturer, we are ready to pivot to another manufacturer or another system. So there's been a whole exercise and work stream around that. And then lastly, I would say that we have been able to get very creative If all that goes sideways, which, I think we've got a very good plan, but the next step, what we would look at is completing the building in a way that the public is able to attend the event, if we're talking specifically about CIAA, and prioritizing the things that are needed for that event. And if we were really jammed on time, we would be looking to continue the construction post CIAA event. And so the general public would come in, they would have the fantastic experience, they would have new concession stands, but there may be elements of the project that they aren't seeing that we've had to push out either beyond the CIAA, or we're bringing them on and still working while that's going on. So that's kind of the pull the ripcord approach at the end. Nobody wants to go in that direction. We'd like to, and we think we will have it all done and dusted and ready to have at the CIAA tournament, with fully completed, signed off, ready to rock and roll. But I would say that contingency we've dealt with before on other projects, and have been able to work through a situation where we can get people in the building, have the event, have everybody have a great experience. You don't really see what's going on behind the walls. There's some things that need to be finished up, and we've done some of those things after the fact.
So thank you, Mr. Collins, for going through that process. This is no news to the administration or BDC. I've had grave concerns about this 11-month window associated with the construction, because I know how important CIAA is to the city, not just as it relates to the economic impact for that one particular weekend, but the potential residual effects that it could carry over, like it's done in its former home of Charlotte. So the idea of us trying to get into a longer term agreement or arrangement with them is of importance of myself. When we talk about that contingency plan, will there be a point in time, and when will that occur, that we will prepare for worst case? Again, I hear the idealistic kind of approach, and I have full confidence in the administration and BDC as well as in Oakview. But my mind is mapped to look at it from a worst case scenario perspective. And I would feel a lot more comfortable if we were able to not conceptually understand what the contingency plan was to look like, but if we could actually jot that out. Is there any plan on doing that, developing maybe a secondary work schedule that has some of those fail stops in place, so we know that in 3 months, in 6 months, in 9 months, the things that we're going to have to do to ensure that we can provide a fully functioning CIAA tournament come 2023.
If I may, Mr. President, Lease Harris-Jones on behalf of Oakview. I think my client has expressed that what you have just asked, they are prepared for. They have already expended the time and resources to prepare for the best case scenario, which they intend to have the project neat and complete in a timely manner in time for the CIAA. But as Steve has shared, this is not new to them, that things could go wrong, and they have already spent the time and resources to put a plan in place if that were to occur. But to share a date certain of when that contingency plan would kick in would be to look into a crystal ball and to know what the actual issue, if it ever were to occur, that would slow the project down.
Yes, Ms. Lisa Harris-Jones Malone, that's not what I'm asking for.
Okay.
What I asked for is what the contingency plan is. I haven't seen a contingency plan yet. I met with the BDC, I believe, a week or two ago, had the ability of sitting down with Deputy Carter as well. And all I'm asking for is the details associated with the contingency plan. So things specific to, like, at 60% complete or 85% complete, what are those items that are complete? Like, what is the actual construction plan, so that we have full transparency, as well as we set the levels of expectations right for the commissioners of the CIAA, as well as for the presidents and the schools of the CIAA. So we're all on the same page. As an elected official for the city of Baltimore, I have not seen that level of detail. And I'm pretty sure that our partners that we're trying to work with and ensuring that we continue to have this relationship with the CIAA, I'm sure that they have not. So I'm not asking for us to look in a crystal ball to determine when the date of that would kick off or anything. What I'm asking for is we're going to have a construction schedule, but I'm asking for a secondary contingency construction schedule. So we're all on the same page of really understanding on what that construction schedule looks like and what we can provide as it relates to the level of expectations for the members of the CIAA.
Sure, and we've been working very closely with the administration, Mr. Carter, Colin, the mayor's office has already asked us to sit down after we get through the award process, and our client, and Steve can speak to this as well, we're prepared to actually meet with the CIAA and those members of the administration that would like to go into the very specific details of the timeline and whatever contingency we have in place. If there anything were to go wrong, we've had those conversations. You know, luckily we have an administration that has been very aggressive to stay on top of us to make sure that nothing goes wrong as we work through this 11-month process of making sure it's neat and complete in time for the CIAA. I don't know if Steve wants to go. It may take a great deal of time to go into the details of that plan. I don't know.
No, I don't want to do that. I guess at this point, I appreciate what you've brought to the table, Steve, as well as Ms. Lisa Harris Jones Malone. I guess I'll turn it back to the administration. For months, I've been asking about a contingency plan. I believe during our call with BDC last week, I was informed that there was not a contingency plan. But what I'm hearing from Oakview today, that there potentially is. So is there a contingency plan that the city knows about or not?
Mr. President, I can just answer it. I think our interpretation of what you referred to as a contingency plan was a relocation plan. That does not exist today. The contingency plan, I think, is outlined as Mr. Collins detailed, would be more on the construction side, and that there is confidence that we're going to deliver the facility. As Ms. Harris said, we will be meeting with the CIAA in partnership with Visit Baltimore. Obviously, the contract has not been approved yet, so that would have been premature. But assuming that the contract is approved, then we would certainly meet with CIAA, Oakview, and Visit Baltimore to make sure that we're having conversations with them and updating them. And we're happy to update your office as well on the construction. And I think that the goal right now is to deliver the arena in time for 2023. If for some reason that changes, that will obviously be communicated to all the stakeholders. But right now, I think it's just a little premature to have that. But we're also happy to work on that plan in the next 30 to 90 days.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor and CEO Tarbert, I've been a broken record about this since the decision was to do the site-specific bid. It was very concerning, that this could potentially impact the CIAA. So, any support, any briefings, any communication that you can kind of keep me abreast of, definitely interested in that, particularly as it relates to the contingency plan. The idea, if we needed to come up with a different solution, meaning a different site, to me falls directly into the contingency plan of if we're going to be ready to go at 85% complete and kind of what that looks like and what that feels like. I know that you've provided some exterior, interior renderings, but many of them are conceptual at best. So, I'm really interested in kind of digging down further into the details of what the expectation is of this $150 million private equity investment into the Baltimore arena. I want to ensure that, one, we're not cutting any corners. The idea that we're doing a development of this scale in 11 months, I've heard from Mr. Collins, and I appreciate his background and his skill set. But I think anybody would say that that is beyond aggressive. And that, again, through Murphy's Law, if something can go wrong, potentially it will go wrong, particularly coming out of a pandemic when we're faced with the supply chain issues that we're kind of faced with. So that is where my wholehearted concern has been for a very long time since we originally started talking about this, Mr. CEO. Before I turn to you, Mayor, I just have another question for you. What is the projected, because I think that people hear these four letters, CIAA, right? And they don't necessarily know what it is. They don't necessarily know what it'll bring to the city. So I just want for folks that are like listening out there to really understand and know what we're talking about here. It's the third largest collegiate basketball tournament in the entire country. We've seen the data associated for what it was able to do for Charlotte, North Carolina's economy, not just as it relates to that particular week of the CIAA tournament, but again, the residual effect that it has. And we know from a cultural perspective, it fits right into the heart of who we are as a city of Baltimore. And we could develop a way that this could be a long-term arrangement and agreement. The fact that we were able to get it here, it takes a tremendous amount of kudos off to the team that was able to sell Baltimore and bring the individuals to know that the CIAA will be fully functioning and operating here in the city of Baltimore. And I'm just concerned that coming out of COVID and now doing with this arena, that it could potentially impact. So just for a high level perspective, CEO Tarbert, what is the projected economic impact that we expect that we could potentially see with the inclusion of this tournament?
Yeah, I'll defer to my colleague, Mr. Al Hutchinson, who is leading the effort from Visit Baltimore.
Mr. President, if I may, because I think you and I are going down the same line of questioning here, and my actual question was for Al about not just what you said about the economic impact, but Al has been, as you know, leading the CIAA efforts, and really want him to talk about this particular deal in reference to the CIAA and how things have been going and how important it is on that front too, in addition to the economic output.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The CEO, Hutchinson, could you lay out the economic impact that we expect to see and any other financial information that you think is germane to why it's important to keep the CIAA in Baltimore City?
Yes, good morning. Thank you, Mr. President and Mr. Mayor, and to the rest of the board here. CIAA and Charlotte, and these are pre-pandemic numbers, it was about a $50 million economic impact to Charlotte. And so over a 15-year period, you can calculate what the huge economic impact was to that community, both the city and the state of North Carolina. For that last week in February in Charlotte, they had upwards of 100,000 people in town for the tournament. Everyone did not attend the game, but they were in hotels, restaurants, and really contributed to the financial revenue to Charlotte, Mecklenburg County. So it's much bigger than just basketball. Basketball is the backdrop for these 12 historically Black colleges and universities, but it is a social event, family reunion. It's a huge event that folks will be coming to Baltimore in 2022. We did a 3-year contract with the CIAA. 21 obviously went all virtual, and so 22 will be live basketball. And we're expecting a large number of people here. We're hopeful upwards of between 80,000 to 100,000 people here in Baltimore City. And so it's a really, really big event for the community, not only for Baltimore City, but the state of Maryland and the entire region. This is a huge economic engine for Baltimore. And I would say to you that from a basketball perspective, it's going to be huge, but also we have an opportunity to showcase our city, and potentially folks coming in with high disposable incomes may want to relocate their business in Baltimore, send their young folks to school here in Baltimore, or they may even want to buy a home here in Baltimore City. So it's a really big opportunity for us. I will say in reference to the arena renovations, obviously from Visit Baltimore's perspective, we're in line with it. Any upgrade to a great asset here in Baltimore, we're very supportive of. We're excited about a renovation of Royal Farms Arena because that can help us hopefully continue to keep the CIAA in Baltimore for years to come, in addition to attracting other big events to Baltimore. So everything that we're hearing from the mayor's team that it's going to be delivered on time. It's not going to be any disruption to the CIAA. So based on those conversations, we're in alignment with it. I'm not in the construction business. I'm a marketeer. So I'm here to really promote the city and promote a new asset or an improved asset. So we are excited about it. And I think the CIAA will be excited as well. They're going to need to be educated to the process at some point, but I think they will in turn be excited about where we're going to upgrade one of our facilities.
Now, Mr. Hutchinson, I just want to make it very clear that the residual things that you laid out were very consistent to things that I've heard from colleagues in Charlotte and folks that have participated in the tournament in Charlotte. As a son of a school in the South, I've had the opportunity of participating in several CIAAs as well. I just want to lay out when you were talking about what the tournament meant for the city of Charlotte outside of that particular week. That's not anecdotal. That is what actually happened in the city of Charlotte as relates to the tournament. Is that accurate?
That is accurate, Mr. President. In fact, there's data over the 15-year period, Charlotte's residency increased. So folks came in for basketball, had a great experience in Charlotte, and in turn moved to Charlotte. So that's really what's at stake here. Yeah, it is about basketball, men's and women's basketball. But if we really approach this in a holistic perspective, it's much bigger than just basketball. This is about increasing the Baltimore brand and bringing additional revenue to our community and additional residents to our region. So there's a lot at stake here. And so, yeah, I was on the team to help bring the CIAA basketball tournament here, but we didn't pitch it just about basketball. We pitched it about all of the other economic investments to Baltimore City if we did it right. And so the arena is a very important part to where we're going. And my hope is we can upgrade this building, make it a more modern facility, and the CIAA will love it and stay past 2023.
Now, thank you for providing that. What are the next steps for us to get the CIAA comfortable enough with the city of Baltimore to lock in additional years past 2023?
Well, I've had this conversation with Deputy Mayor Carter and Colin to a certain extent, and the mayor. We just at the right time, once we get through this process today, we need to have a very comprehensive and transparent conversation with the commissioner and the 12 presidents about where we're going forward. And I think that's what they're looking for at the right time. But that's where the ball's going to be in our court to deliver that information and the excitement we have about growing the city to them really, really soon, probably in the next couple of weeks.
Thank you. Well, as a sports fanatic, I had the opportunity of leading the charge to save the Preakness and save Pimlico. And the reason that we did it wasn't for that particular event, but was really for the economic impact that it meant to the city of Baltimore. I think that we were able to do a enormous job of saving it and keeping it here in the city of Baltimore. And knowing that this particular tournament would potentially outgross, even by a conservative swag at the numbers, of what the economic impact is of the Preakness on Baltimore. We cannot afford to lose this tournament. We can't afford to lose it to Richmond, to Philadelphia. We must keep this tournament in the city of Baltimore. I know that the mayor is a strong advocate of that. But again, just doubling down on my concerns around this plan associated with the arena, the fact that we decided to do a site-specific bid where we didn't allow the creative juices of developers and who are the like to kind of come up with maybe there's other areas in which we could have done it in. We've decided to do it here. It just provides a tremendous amount of concern of mine. I plead with you, Mr. Mayor, publicly that you keep me engaged on the process, particularly as it relates to the contingency plan. This is nothing new to the administration. I've literally been a broken record about this since we decided to go down this path several months ago. I'm a committed partner But we have to have all hands on deck to ensure that we deliver the best in quality service, venue, and operations for our city to ensure that we have the best shot of keeping the CIAA here in the city of Baltimore. I know I just don't share that belief. I know the mayor shares that belief. I know Deputy Mayor Carter shares that belief. I know CEO Tarbert shares that belief, and definitely through all your blood, sweat, and tears, CEO Hutchinson, I know you also share that belief. So with that, are there any additional questions or concerns from other members of the board? Mr. Mayor, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I just have one follow-up question, Mr. President. We will absolutely keep you updated. And I guess this question will be for Ms. Jones or Mr. Collins around on the project, what they have as far as MBE and WBE goals.
Sure. Consistent with what Mr. Collins pointed out earlier, that we've been at work to prepare for the award of this contract for, in the case of the MBE, WBE goals, from the onset of being engaged back in November. We've already had fairs, meetings, briefings with state and local MBE, WBEs that are interested in the project. We intend to, as the contract has right now, to more than meet the 27% MBE and 10% WBE participation. We're looking at a goal of hitting 45% or more in that regard. We've done that in other and on other projects in other cities, and will likely exceed that, not just on construction, but the ongoing operation of the arena. It's a very important project to me with respect to the MBE, WBE goals. As you know, I sat on the MBE, WBE appeals board for the city of Baltimore for close to 20 years. Have been very a big part of drafting and assisting with the laws related to state and local in that regard. This is a client that from day one is probably one of the best clients that has and wants to and is sincere in meeting these goals and has been committed to doing that. So you're not going to have a problem with OVG in that regard. I think they're going to end up being the case study, or what's the word I'm looking at, for other companies that enter the Baltimore metropolitan area on what it looks like to work with MBE and WBEs and make sure that your project and your operation reflects the community and the city that it sits in.
Thank you, Mr. Lisa Juris. Ms. Lisa Harris Jones Malone. In the same line of that question.
Mr. President, actually, I had just a follow-up to that.
Go ahead, Mr. Mayor, you go ahead.
Yeah, Mrs. Jones, can you guys give examples? You said in other cities you've exceeded the goal. Do you guys have examples of what the goal were and what your actual achievement was in some of the other projects that Mr. Collins mentioned earlier?
Sure. I don't know if Steve has the exact amount, because I want to stay honest, but a most recent one that they worked on exceeded 45%. I think it actually leaned up against 60, but I can get that information to you. I don't have that in front of me.
I don't know if Mr. Collins is still with us or not, so.
No, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, I'm still with you. I would, if you don't mind us circling back just to make sure we're giving you accurate numbers, and a couple of those projects, like the forum, were not OVG projects. They were projects that I worked on, and I'm happy to share that data. I just want to make sure that I'm giving you the right data.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I know that right now the current operations of the arena has zero minority participation from a concession or catering perspective. Is the exclusivity deal with Crown going to be carried over from the current operations to the new operations under Oakview?
those are things that they are in negotiations with. I do know that we have introduced them to several MBE, WBEs local to this area. I don't want to share the names of the company.
Yeah, that's fine, but I guess what we would
I
wanna-
don't think that's the intention. I think I don't want to say.
I guess what we would want to know is that there is not an intention of not having minority participation as relates to the concession and catering operations, that the existing agreement associated with Crown and the way that the arena is currently ran, that there's no want or need from Oakview to keep that same arrangement.
They're in negotiations and discussions with MBE, WBEs in the areas of concession. I will share that. I will say that.
Got you. So the idea that there's going to be exclusivity to one a vendor, that is not going to be the case. Just want to make sure we're all on the same page moving forward.
I can share that after they've concluded their discussions and negotiations. That would be the goal, not to, but I can't tell you until
These are the type of, Mr. Mayor and to the administration, these are the type of details that they're not new for us to talk about. We've talked about this from the beginning. And when we get to this point of making this really, really important decision, it's those high level details that are really important in making that decision. The fact of the matter is the expectation is, talking with Oakview, they should be able to adamantly say that the existing arrangement associated with this exclusivity to a vendor where we have 0% of minority or women participation in concession of the current arena, that we understand and know that moving forward, that is not to be the case. All right. So
in fairness to Oakview, what I will say is that I will get back to you on that. I don't want to in a public forum.
No, I realize that. And really the question is more to the administration, to the BDC, to whomever else is working to do that. I mean, the reality is that should be factored in part of our choice of moving forward with this bid. Because we understand and know that, a diverse opportunity, everyone having a seat at the table creates a better outcome and product for the citizens of Baltimore, right? So that is the only thing that I'm saying. I had no expectation for you at this point, Ms. Lisa Harris-Jones. This was more or less for the administration because we decided to move down in this path, and those things should have been factored in. Again, this is not me bringing this up on this Board of Estimates meeting. This is something I've been a broken record about since the beginning of us going down this path, knowing how the current operations of the Baltimore Arena run. I think I saw a hand of the comptroller. Ms. Comptroller, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. I had a question for Mr. Tarbert. On the board memo for this item, under MBWB participation, it says the tenant has also committed to achieve 45% MBWB participation among its vendors and employees during operations. Is that commitment part of the lease, or is that a separate commitment?
That's in the lease document itself. So the council president's sort of comment, we have set this this goal on 45% among vendors. How they achieve that, I think, is still to be determined as they go through their due diligence process.
But among vendors and employees during operations would include concessionaires, correct?
Correct. That would be one of the type of vendors that could fall.
I hate to play semantics, but could include, not would include. So what you could do is you could keep an existing relationship where the concession could be 5%, but when you roll everything up to cleaning, security, or anything else, it could equate to 45%. I think the point that I was trying to specifically talk about when we're talking about that 45%, and what I've specifically asked is, when we talk about the exclusivity associated with concession and catering, if the idea was to continue that same relationship moving forward.
Well, Mr. President, that was kind of the point of my question, is the board memo is not vague. The board memo says the tenant has committed to achieve 45% among its vendors and employees during operations. And Mr. Tarbert is saying this is the language that is in the lease. Is there vagueness? Is there more vagueness in the lease?
No, I believe that's the language that is in the lease.
Okay, thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Comptroller. Again, getting back to the concern, and thank you, Mr. Comptroller, for expounding on it. That is of a major concern of mine and will continue to be. I mean, talking about vendors and employees at 45%, I don't even know what that means. And again, when we make important decisions like this, those high-level details should be part of us making this decision. I hate to continue to go back, but it's kind of like us making the decision associated with the extension of the camera contract. And then 3 months later, we come and throw in an amendment of an extremely lucrative aspect. All of those variables should be factored into this decision-making process. So again, I don't even know what 45% of vendors and employee means. I don't know what that equates to and how that looks like. I just know that right now there's an exclusivity contract where there is zero participation from a minority or women, that particular aspect. And the way that the vagueness of that language is, it could still remain in place. So that's why I wanted to understand and know on the record that there was no intention of moving down that path. And I don't think that there's anyone from the administration or from Oakview that can kind of make me feel a little more comfortable about that today. Silence. Are there any other additional questions or concerns from members of the board regarding this particular contract? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Move approval. Second.
It's been moved and properly seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. Please note that I'm a nay. So this item is approved from a vote of 4 yeas and 1 nay. At this point, this will conclude the business before the desk of the Board of Estimates. We'll recess until bid opening at 12 noon. The Board of Estimates will be in recess next week. The board will reconvene on Wednesday, December the 8th at 9 a.m. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. Baltimore, have an amazing, happy Thanksgiving, and we love you.